It's Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, it's Johnny Cash Friday. Welcome back to the program. We've got on the line Congressman Bruce Westerman. Congressman Westerman, how are you this morning?
Doing well, Paul. Good to be with you again on Johnny Cash Friday. I could just listen to your music, and your listeners might like that better too.
No, I sometimes I feel the same way. I'm just like, we got to get to the news now, and I feel like they kind of feel that way. So what's going on with you, Congressman Westerman? How's Washington D.C.? Are you in D.C. now, or are you back home?
No, I'm back in Arkansas, and I'm actually traveling the 4th District right now, so I hope we don't lose you as we're going down the road.
No, I understand.
But,
yeah.
Be up in up on the Mulberry River later this afternoon for a ceremony up there to recognize the 50 years of the National Wild and Scenic River Act, and getting out and visiting with constituents today.
Well, that's good. Can we talk just a little bit? I mean, I feel like one of the biggest things, it was I don't know about several weeks ago, but it was a little bit ago, but it was the omnibus vote. So talk a little bit about the omnibus vote. How did you vote on that bill?
Well, I voted against it, Paul, and it's not because there weren't some good things in the bill. There were some really good things in the bill. Some stuff with the military, some issues related to management on our national forest that I've literally worked on since I've been in Congress. So, it wasn't everything I've worked on, but a lot of the work that I've done for the past 3 years, some major components of that got shoved into that omnibus bill. But the bottom line is it will increase the deficit $1 trillion. It was a 2,300-page bill that, had you been able to read continuous, you'd had to read 132 pages per hour from the time it was filed to the time to vote on it to even read through it, much less read through it where you could comprehend it and understand what's in it. And it just was loaded up with pork and wants from Democratic senators who held out to the very end to get what they wanted in this bill. So I can't vote for something like that. I don't think that's what the voters of the 4th District of Arkansas expect from me. And I don't know how to change the process other than opposing it and working hard to do something different. But a lot of times it comes down to the 60-vote rule in the Senate, because we had already passed all 12 appropriation bills in the House. Last September they were sitting in the Senate, and that's how the government should be funded, but they never took a single one of those bills up for a vote. We got into these continuing resolutions. Mm-hmm. The government shutdowns that were supposedly going to happen. I guess it did happen for over a weekend. And then you get another crisis situation, and this mother lode of all bills comes across that's not just the spending bills to get us through the end of this year, but it's got all kinds of policy and law changes in it. So I don't think that's how our founders intended for our country to function, and I'm just not going to be a part of it.
Yeah. Well, and, it was a fiscal nightmare, and it did add a lot to the debt. And like you said, it did do some good things. But, yeah, I can totally understand that vote, because at some point, no one even talks about the debt anymore. I mean, it used to be something that people on the right talked about. They were concerned about. It doesn't seem to be the case anymore. What are your thoughts on that?
I appreciate you talking about it and reporting on it. It's not that people aren't talking about it. It's just that it doesn't get the headlines in the news. It's not, it's not Russia or what the latest thing is that the mainstream media wants to report about. But I can promise you I'm still talking about it. I've got a lot of colleagues that are talking about it. And I've got a piece of legislation that I'm working on that it's similar to something I sponsored in the state legislature. It was to cap the growth rate in spending. I serve on the budget committee, and we had a revised baseline that was put out by CBO a couple of weeks ago. I sat through the hearing on that, and I studied the report. And, they're projecting over the next 10 years we're going to spend $12 trillion that we don't have. So we're going to take our $21 trillion debt and add another 12 to that in 10 years. But if you look at what CBO calls the baseline, they're increasing the baseline nearly 6% per year every year. And if you reduce that baseline, CBO calls that a cut. That's how messed up Washington, D.C. is. But if we would simply hold the baseline to 2% or 2.5%, we could balance the budget in 8 years, even with everything that's going on now. If we would do that, so I'm working on legislation to put language around a proposal like that, and that's the kind of stuff we're going to have to do if we ever want to change the trajectory that we're on. But we can't just sit here and say that, we've got an economy that's growing great. They're saying now 3.3% for the GDP, but we're still going to grow spending at the baseline level at nearly 6% per year. The math doesn't work when you're already $21 trillion in debt and you're spending at a rate twice as fast as the economy's growing in the federal government. So, and I would even be willing to say this, that from the purpose of the Budget Committee is to put a ceiling for expenditures and a floor for revenue. So that gives instruction to the rest of the House on how to write tax bills and how to write spending bills and how to write policy that makes those things happen. I would be willing to say that let's tag the growth in spending to the growth rate of the economy and say that the spending can't grow at a faster rate of the economy. And I would be willing to also say that taxes have to increase at the same rate as the economy, because you know what? We collect more revenue at a rate faster than what the economy is growing, and that's even with the tax cut, and that's in the CBO baseline. So the problem is not having enough revenue. The problem is spending too much money. And I guess I'm going to keep saying that till my head hurts, but until we address that fundamental issue, we're never going to change the deficit spending and the debt that we have in this country, and it is a serious problem.
Yes, it is, and at some point you have to pay the bills, and that's the day of, it's like we've got to get our fiscal house in order now. The discretionary spending versus non-discretionary. I mean, we've talked about this before, Congressman Westerman. I mean, this is the non-discretionary spending, the basically the stuff that you don't have an option. I mean, that's what really needs reform, right? I mean, because that's so much of the money that they get every year.
That's closing in on 3/4 of everything that the federal government spends, and it's Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, about 80-plus social welfare programs, and interest on the debt. Those 5 things make up 3/4 of everything the federal government spends. Now, that omnibus bill a few weeks ago, that was, for the most part, discretionary spending. So we jacked the deficit up by $1 trillion on the discretionary side, but the non-discretionary or the mandatory is what's definitely driving the deficit. And it's growing at astronomical rates, and that's part of it. You got all these baby boomers that are retiring that are using Medicare and Social Security at a higher rate than it's been funded at, and then you've got Medicaid, which is an endless pit, and you got all these social welfare programs, and then you got interest on the debt. That it is what it is, and you think when you're $21 trillion in debt, every percentage point that the interest rates go up, that's another $210 billion of payment on interest on the debt. So, if we were to see interest rates go up 3 or 4 points, and I remember when I was a kid, interest rates were 10 to 20%. We would go bankrupt we would wreck our economy in a major hurry if we saw 10 to 15% interest rate.
Yeah, it'd be overnight. I mean, I think it would be one day, and then you wake up the next day, and it's just kind of chaos for sure. So let me ask you this: we're talking with Congressman Bruce Westerman. The Speaker, Paul Ryan, says he's ending and winding down his service. How was that taken? I understand there was you guys caucus, and that's when he announced, and then the press got wind of it maybe a little early. But I mean, what are your thoughts on Speaker Paul Ryan and his exit coming up soon?
Well, I wish him well. He says he wants to spend more time with his family. I can certainly understand that. And I think until you've been around someone that's in that position and you see the amount of of time and effort that it takes. I mean, since the day he's been elected Speaker, my observation is he's been like a jet rocket with the afterburners on. I mean, just going as hard as he can go all the time. And it's a job that wears on you. He's the one that's having to negotiate with Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer, and he's the one that led the House to get all 12 appropriation bills passed, but then got jammed because of the what was happening over in the Senate. And I was walking with Trey Gowdy the other morning, and he's retiring too. I was asking him, Trey, what are you going to do when you get out of office? And he was telling me about his plans to maybe teach at a college and go back and practice law. And he asked me if I saw what he had written about Paul Ryan's retirement. I said, no, I didn't see it. And he said, well, the last line said something that if you don't like the job that Paul did and you think he's a bad person, he said there's no restriction for anybody in this country to serve as Speaker of the House, so you ought to just get in line and put your name in the hat. And the point he was making is that that job is naturally going to take a lot of flack from both your friends and your enemies. And I can't help but respect the job that Paul did. I didn't agree with everything, but I've seen it from a position that not a lot of other people have seen.
Yeah.
How difficult that job is.
Well, and they were talking about what his legacy is, and kind of this goes back to the spending. I mean, the tax cuts are great. I know everybody's proud of that, and people have more money in their paychecks, but I kind of feel like he did want to get spending under control. I mean, that's when he kind of went on the national stage, or was kind of was catapulted that way. I mean, I remember seeing some of the videos about trying to get the deficit and the debt under control, and it's unfortunate that we're still having this conversation because there just doesn't seem to be the political will to do anything about it.
Right, and there's still a strong push to do something about it. Don't think the political will's not there. It's just getting the number of votes that you need and getting.
Right.
I think getting the electorate to understand how important this debt is, and we've got to get folks in the Senate and in the House that will address this issue, because the issue is not going away. It's not magically going to disappear overnight. So we have to continue working on it.
We got the National Guard, going down to the border. What are your thoughts on that?
I think that's a great move. I think you and I have talked since I made the trip down to the border and saw how the drug cartels are operating on the U.S. side of the border. They've got spotters out in the hills. I've witnessed it firsthand with the Border Patrol closing in on a group of illegals that had crossed the border, and as the 3 Border Patrol vehicles closed in on them, that group split into 2 groups, and we went after the front group, and they split into 3 groups, and it's because there was a spotter up in the mountain monitoring where the Border Patrol was moving, and the amount of drugs that are coming across the southern border are unreal. 192 pounds of fentanyl in 3 months was seized crossing the southern border. That was testimony in the committee that I chair.
Wow.
On oversight on federal lands there along the border. And to do the math on that, 2 milligrams of fentanyl will kill a person, so 192 pounds is enough to kill about 43 million people. That's what they seized in 3 months along the southern border.
Well, so something's got to be done about this, and the Trump administration is trying to do everything they can. And I think at this point, I mean, this is, the wall funding and everything else, and the military, being used in this capacity. Do you think there's any chance that the military, in terms of national defense? I mean, there's been some reports on this that Trump's just going to use military and the funding he got with the omnibus to build the wall. Have you heard anything about that?
Well, I think he's like a bulldog on this. It's a very important issue to him, and he wants to see that southern border secure. Now, I'm for a wall and a physical barrier through there, but it's worse than that. There are places along the border where there's not even a road, and it's in wilderness areas, and there are environmental laws that don't allow the Border Patrol to put roads in. So for the agents to get in there, they either have to walk in or ride a horse or get dropped in by a helicopter. So there's a whole lot we could do that's going to have to be done. You can't build a wall along the border without a road along the border, and a road along the border that was paved where they could have better access would go a long way as far as stopping a lot of the illegal crossings.
Congressman Bruce,
but we don't even have that right now.
Yeah, well, you're exactly right. Yeah, we would definitely need to fix some of those EPA laws. Congressman Bruce Westerman, I appreciate you coming on the program. It's always a pleasure to have you on.
Yeah, it's great to be with you, Paul, and I appreciate you talking about issues that are important. Talking about the debt, the deficit, and it's not all the time I get media folks that want to talk about that. So thank you.
Hey, absolutely. Anytime. We'll do this again in a couple of weeks. In the meantime, be safe, okay?
All right. Thank you.
All right, folks, it's Johnny Cash Friday. We're going to break. We'll be back in just a moment. Again, if you haven't heard our newest parody, it'll play when we come back from break. So stay tuned.